How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Hey, welcome back. This is the Dr. Joe Show here at WATD 95.9, your South Shore everything. Yeah. How you doing, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing pretty well, Mark. You know, there's so much going on in the world, but we have to stay focused. We have to stay focused, and we have to figure out,
control what we can control, right?
Yeah, and influence what we can influence.
Exactly right.
The whole idea, you control no one, you influence everyone. But I just want to make a public announcement of the support I feel for all the folks who have been struggling, the horrible things that have happened in Minnesota, and I just hope the world that we have to come together around this in a way to move us forward. There's so much stress and conflict in the world, but it's a huge cortisol response, and we know, I don't mean to get all techie on people, but cortisol is the neurohormone of stress. And that interferes with dopamine, the neurohormone of pleasure, and it interferes with oxytocin, not OxyContin. Oxytocin, the neurohormone of trust and happiness. How are you meant to feel any pleasure or happiness under this much stress? But it's brain. It's not a moral issue. It's brain, and we must now step back and look again who we are and why we do what we do. So that's where I'm coming from, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to continue talking about this. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, there's a lot going on, Dr. Joe. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And well, we can do what we can do, and we can continue to spread the I Am and hope that people listen and receive it and value one another, because that's what it's all about, right?
It's so what it's all about. And it's applicable, obviously, in all the domains, the home domain, the social domain, how we feel about ourselves and others, how that affects our brain. But it's also applicable in some ways to everything else. But what is wonderful is tonight we have an incredible guest. And Mark, could you please introduce our guest for the Dr. Joe Show tonight?
I sure will, Dr. Joe. And I'll start by saying what he's done. And it's a lot. Starting at the age of 12, residential landscape maintenance, pulling weeds and mowing lawns and washing dishes, and then working his way through college in various jobs of restaurants, household moving, bartending, live-in aid, a bouncer at a strip club.
Wow. Yeah.
I think we're going to have to talk about that for a moment. He earned his bachelor's degree in psychology from San Diego State University. That's right, SDSU, where it is 78 degrees, 365 days a year. He worked at a psychiatric aide in a mental health ICU. He landed in corporate land in the great year of 1979 with Martin Marietta Aluminum. You've probably heard of that. He got his master's degree in organizational psychology from California State University at Long Beach in 1981 with his thesis, Stress as a Reward for Task Performance in Rats. He held human resources jobs. He became an entrepreneur in 1989, founding HRG Inc., where they provided the full range of organizational consulting services. So he was an early frontier person when it came to business consulting. He left and went to work with one of his finest clients. I think you know this company, WD-40. He served on 13 different private company boards representing revenue rates from startups to $200 million companies and advised many others. For 10 years, he wrote a weekly column on business, leadership, and life for the San Diego Daily Transcript. He is a business psychologist because human behavior within the context of creating economic success is his life's work. Please meet Stan Sewitch. Sewitch.
Stan Sewitch.
Stan Sewitch from Sewitch Etc. Corporation. Welcome, Stan.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And don't worry about my last name pronunciation. No one gets it right, including me.
So I'm just curious, what's it like for you to hear all these accomplishments over the years?
Well, the first word that comes to mind is mutt, because I wouldn't have planned that kind of a journey, and I wouldn't have predicted it. But I feel very fortunate that I've had the quilt of a career that I have.
Yeah, it's amazing. And now your book, Engage, How WD-40 Company Built the Engine of Positive Culture. So why don't we start right there? What is the engine of positive culture?
Well, it's comprised of a number of parts that most people don't dig into when they think about designing a system to promote the qualities and characteristics that result in a positive culture. And so some of those parts include having, of course, values, a stated purpose, a mission perhaps of the organization, if that's appropriate. And most companies address that. But what they don't address is, what do we expect of leaders? How do we apply our values? How do we measure whether or not those values are being lived? What is our compensation system? How do we evaluate candidates for hire? Because who you hire becomes your culture. It doesn't, most companies don't dig deeply into those types of systems, whether or not the job is designed correctly or the organizational structure is supportive of both the business and the experience of the people in it. And so the book that I wrote goes over, not in, unfortunately, the kind of depth that would be a complete treatment, but at least it introduces some key ideas in those different engine parts to the interested senior leader, CEO, COO, et cetera, of a company that's not trying to decide whether or not they want a positive culture, but now they've committed to that. Now they don't know how to design the engine.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I mean, Mark, you're an entrepreneur as well. How does
it's so important, culture, right? I mean, it's hard to put the tangible value to culture other than everything, right? So that's a great mission and purpose that you're pursuing there to help companies with that culture.
And that's actually the title of one of the chapters. Values come first, then purpose. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Values come first and then purpose.
Sure. Your values determine what you'd even consider to be a purpose. For example, if your purpose comes first and the purpose is to grow a successful business, growing profitably over a period of decades, and providing return to shareholders and a place where people can build careers, but your values haven't been set yet, you might decide on an industry or a way of making money that would violate values that you would otherwise have established first. When is money not the trump card, for example? That's what values ask you. When do you follow your values, even at the expense of the business results?
Yeah. And one of the things that we say is respect leads to value and value leads to trust. And so how would you tie that in, the idea of respecting all the people who are working in your company as the CEO?
Well, respect is the result of compassion, understanding, humility, and the willingness to listen to somebody else's perspective. It's also the result of treating people as you would in a meritocracy according to what they contribute and how well they live the values of that organization. Yeah. And respect also comes as a baseline expectation of how you treat people and should be treated if you subscribe to the notion that no human is above another.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are very fortunate to have the respect of our sponsors who value us, and that allows us to trust them. So with that in mind, Larry, let's take a break and hear from our respectful sponsors. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show and Stan Sewitch.
And we're back. I'll take it from here, Larry, with the Dr. Joe Show on 95.9. We're here with business psychologist, consultant, coach, and author Stan Sewitch, talking about his book, Engage, how the WD-40 company built the engine of positive culture. Stan, when you've been on such a beautiful journey in business and entrepreneurism, can you put your finger on like when culture became so important for companies and they started to really focus on it?
Well, I think the first time I was aware of a shift in leadership thinking was in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
When U.S. manufacturing companies realized that some of the principles that Japan was employing to succeed in creating high quality products at a reasonable price and taking over the U.S. auto market began to be of interest to U.S. companies. And it's ironic because Edward Deming, who went to Japan after World War II to help them rebuild their economy, was the one who introduced them to the concepts that they just learned and employed to great benefit, and then were re-importing back to the United States as an example. So it was in the mid-'80s, and really the company that was at the forefront of thinking about positive culture was Hewlett-Packard. And unfortunately, that company has gone through a number of changes and is no longer the paragon of positive culture that it once was. But for a couple of decades after the mid-'80s, they were the place that applied employee involvement, quality circles, just-in-time manufacturing, lean manufacturing. But it was on the basis of getting people included and having an organization that had tenure and longevity of employees as a major goal. They were one of the few at that time that said, we don't want to lay people off. We want to preserve the people that we have. It took a long time to find them, to train them, and it would be stupid of us to allow ourselves to get into a situation where we had to let people go to stay in existence. And I'll just take a side note. WD-40 has not had a layoff for financial reasons in its entire history, which is over 70 years. And I was thankfully part of keeping that trend going in the 20 odd years that I was involved with it. But back to your question, Hewlett-Packard came first, I think, and then Springfield Remanufacturing, Jack Stack, who wrote The Great Game of Business, he took it a step further and really empowered the line employees to first be aware of the financial numbers that weren't typically shared with rank and file, as the term used to be, but also to include them in making decisions about how to improve the business. And it was a phenomenal turnaround in one of the case studies of how effective that involvement can be. That got people started. But it's been interesting to me that even with the evidence of how high engagement, high involvement, transparency, and trust generate phenomenal results, that there aren't more organizations who are adopting it. The Gallup poll continues to show in their biannual or biennial surveys that no more than about 30% of the American workforce is truly engaged. And globally, it still hovers around 15 to 17%. It's incomprehensible to me. What could be the effect of even raising that engagement figure by 10 points to 40%? It would be in the trillions of dollars of positive results. And yet no one does it.
So let's take a look at this from that sort of sociobiological point of view. So when somebody feels valued and that important information is shared with them, by sharing that information, it says, I trust you. Now, what can you do to help this? What contribution can you make? Is that the psychology that we're looking at?
Oh, there's so much that applies when you treat people with respect. First, make sure you've hired the right people, that they're not in a role that they shouldn't be in, and that they truly want to contribute to the larger group. The front door is a place where you begin to build culture, so make sure that's right. But let's assume that 80-90% of the people in the company are the kind that want to do a good job. They don't want to come to work and fail. And they have the basic competencies that are necessary to succeed. When you treat them like an equal, trust them with the information, and invite them to participate in decisions, it's like an afterburner. It just accelerates their desire to be involved and to contribute. So that's belonging. They feel part of the tribe.
Yeah.
It's the respect that you talk about so much that causes them to feel like they're going to be appreciated if they put themselves out, put themselves forward. And if you allow them to make intelligent mistakes and even applaud that, then that eliminates fear. If you are committed to arranging your finances and your company structure such that people feel safe in hard times, then they have the ability to look farther ahead than the next quarter or the next year. Because if they don't feel safe, they're going to reserve their energy and not devote it to the organization. They're going to be spending time looking for their next gig or their fallback plan because they know they're possibly on the chopping block.
Yeah. Can I just comment on one word, the word allow? Is there, does the word allow somehow perpetuate this hierarchy of power as opposed to encourage? Am I missing something here, or what do you think?
Well, my perspective is that businesses, organizations in general, are a hierarchy.
Yes.
And it's not that they're better people and higher levels of accountability, but they have a level of accountability that requires them to make decisions that can affect the larger organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's a substitution for that leadership responsibility. Somebody's got to look farther ahead than anyone else, be competent, make good decisions with the foundational and sober responsibility for those decisions affecting people. And sometimes you can't come to consensus, and someone still has to decide. So I think leadership is a solemn duty, not a hierarchical statement of prestige and elite privilege.
Yeah. And when you have a charismatic leader who believes in you, then I think it, as I say, it unleashes our unlimited human potential.
And it doesn't have to be a charismatic leader. In fact, the Good to Great book by Jim Collins, his research showed that the CEOs who outperformed their peers by 15 years or more weren't charismatic. They were methodical. They were human. They were humble. They were involved and empowering. And I think that's generally true. There are exceptions, but I don't think the charismatic leader is necessarily the one that outperforms in an organization, peers, or industries. I've seen many that were outstanding leaders who didn't like to stand in front of a group and talk. They didn't look for accolades. They weren't excited about the next interview.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important distinction. I appreciate that. In terms of your own entrepreneurship, how have you applied what you've been learning to your own work?
Well, my first company, HRG, it was about 4 years into it when I'd come out of the raw startup phase. We were starting to grow and grow more sustainably and profitably. I had a number of employees. I realized that because of my own approach to the kind of workplace I wanted to live in, I wanted to include my employees in designing the culture. So I got everybody together and said, we should have a culture statement. This is what we called it. How are we going to work together? Now, it wasn't about our purpose and our mission necessarily. It was about how we were going to interact with each other and by extension with our clients. So we came up with a list of 15 characteristics that we described behaviorally, and that became the foundation for how we would perform together. And I can say with pride that those individuals are still friends of mine, even though we don't work together anymore. We just had a mini reunion in San Diego where people that I hadn't worked together with since 1999. And we're still close friends, and we got together and celebrated the culture that we created and the experiences we had together. So that's was my first experience of trying to create an organization through involvement and consciously choosing the kind of place we wanted to have. And I just repeated that company after company that I was either a co-founder of or involved in some way.
I'm fascinated with this. How did you get into business psychology? I mean, I don't think many people really think about that. We think about psychology in terms of, helping people in their relationships, their family situation, their depression, their anxiety. And yet it seems obviously so applicable to business.
It is. Well, I didn't want to be a businessman when I went into psychology. I was fascinated with my first class in physiological psych, and Dr. Adair, who was our instructor, he just threw stuff at us at 100 miles an hour. And it was all just incredibly interesting to me because for the first time, my scientifically oriented mind and my interest in human behavior came together. So that's what got me hooked on neuroscience. But then having to earn a living brought me into the world of business. While I was taking my master's program, I was working full-time at Martin Marietta Aluminum. What was interesting to me is what I learned in school, either in the evening classes or the occasional day class, I could apply at work the next day, which made taking tests really easy. So it occurred to me that, hey, I can do both. I can earn a good living for my family, apply what I'm learning in this fascinating world of human behavior, and the employees who are positively affected by those principles win. The organization wins, lower turnover, lower hiring costs, lower employee relations efforts, better leaders to solve problems before they become an expensive issue. It just all seemed to make sense.
Yeah. The application of neuroscience to business makes so much sense to me as well. And it's wonderful because it leads right into the idea that when you respect people, they want to do more for you. And I know that this may be repetitive, but that is exactly what our sponsors are doing. And I hope that they're listening. I hope the sponsor listening to this because you can gain something as well for your organization. But for right now, we'll let them talk to our audience. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show.
And we're back right here, 95.9 WATD, with the Dr. Joe Show, with an amazing guest talking about the evolution of culture in business and the human psychology of bringing positive culture, with his book, Engage, how the WD-40 company built the engine for positive culture. We have Stan Sewitch.
Yeah. And so we were off air. We were talking a lot about neuropsychiatry and business. And you brought up a topic, Stan. You want to just jump right into it and tell our audience what we're talking about?
Sure. I thought of a recent example of how the principles of human behavior marry with business well. Gary Ridge, former CEO for 25 years and 35 years with the company of WD-40 Company, and I, now that we're both refired, we're no longer working for WD-40, we have common clients. We both serve on boards, we both do executive coaching, but we also partner up with helping leaders in companies who want to increase their leadership ability on these topics. And we recently had a 2-day workshop with a group of 32 leaders in Northern California. And we first have to have a connection with the CEO and or the owner, who sometimes are the same, where they want what we are proposing is a better route for a company. And that's the key element, is the leader and leaders of the organization have to be willing to think about changing their own behavior. Because if they aren't anticipating behavioral change personally, then nothing happens anyway. These folks were definitely on board with that, and now they just needed some help. So the first day we do a thing called leadership point of view, where everyone writes out responses to some key questions about their journey of life, what their values are, what if they have a mission, what is it? Who are the leaders that informed them, and both good and bad, as to what a leader should be? What can people expect of them as a leader, and what should others expect from them as a leader? And when people share that with each other, something really remarkable happens. They understand each other better, and they demonstrate vulnerability, which is the first step in being a better leader, is to show others that you don't have it all whipped, and you're willing to be transparent about how you came to be who you are, good, bad, or indifferent. Yeah. At that first function, that first morning session, the CEO, they have a CEO and a president, they both gave their leadership point of view, demonstrated vulnerability, which then allowed everyone else to do the same. Mm. We went from that to the principles of human behavior. And you can't do it all in half an hour or a half a day or even half a year. But we picked out certain behavioral truths that have been enduringly valid over the course of many decades of research and thousands of years of human evolution. You mentioned sociobiology. I'm a firm believer that our brain pan is a result of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of evolutionary selection.
I agree.
And we can learn a lot by that.
Absolutely.
Then we went from that to, what kind of leaders do you all want to be? And we allowed them to design it. We didn't put words in their mouth. And so at the end of those 2 days, they have a strong foundation of what they've jointly created and authored. And now their next step is to tell everybody about it, so that the employees who weren't in that room now know what to expect in behavior back from their leaders, and know and are invited to call it out when it does or doesn't happen. Hmm. So that's the way you start to make cultural change, is when the leaders decide they're going to affect their own behavior. As you've said in your IM model, it's what you can do to influence others by how you behave.
That's so true, because then they can mirror, and we set that example of that vulnerability. But in order to do that, you must have been able to create this environment of safety and trust, because you're right. I mean, we have these brains where we're on high alert for predators. And when we're on that high alert for predators, nothing else seems to matter. So how did you create that environment for these leaders where they could be vulnerable.
As outside consultants and advisors, facilitators of such experiences, the first thing we have to do is make sure they know that we're not putting ourselves above them. Oftentimes, you hire a consultant and they have to be the smartest person in the room. They're the ones like a Harvard case study professor who's always poking the stick at you and saying what you've said is wrong. So we start out with humility and sharing the scars that we've experienced because of our own learning moments, as we call them, Gary and I. He coined the phrase and I've adopted it as my own. There aren't mistakes. They're positive or negative experiences that can teach everyone.
Right.
So when you do that, you set the example. Then you invite the leaders to do the same, and they have a moment of truth. If they can also do the same, it completely sets the stage for continued evolution of everyone in the room.
Yeah. And then they model that for their entire company, that vulnerability,
That's
that
right.
trust.
And it's a start. It's a 2-day workshop.
Yeah.
Now it's what's next.
Yeah.
So that takes coaching as invited, and it takes truth telling.
Yeah. Again, the I am is about respect leading to value. And for millennia, human beings have increased their value by decreasing somebody else's. And then are astonished that other person, that other group, that other country does the same. And I think there are a lot of companies that somehow still do that, whether it's, subtle and one worker may do something to the other. But do you see that?
Not only do I see it, some of our most respected and pristine business colleges are promoting it.
How is that?
For example, Stanford Business School, probably one of the most, if not equal to, at times perhaps superior to Harvard. They have a couple thousand graduates a year in their program, a couple thousand students, excuse me. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the UK, was a Stanford MBA grad.
Yeah.
One of the courses they teach in that MBA program at Stanford is by a professor who I won't name. I don't want to down talk people, but the course that he teaches is how not to get fired involuntarily. How not to let that happen to you as a CEO of a major company. Wow. One of the ways he teaches to not get fired is to not train a competent successor.
Yeah, I read that in your book. It's in there. Yeah.
It blew me away. And I don't think that's a one-off. I think a number of senior institutions and name brand organizations, Wall Street comes to mind, promote winning at the expense of others as opposed to winning with the support of others.
Yeah. Yeah. And then are astonished that they have a company where there's tension and stress and mistrust.
And Enron and WorldCom and all the Theranos. I mean, the number of examples are just incredibly numerous and despondently so, where people didn't have values, think that money makes right. We're in an era where might makes right now, but money is might. And so the tendency is to raise up and revere the predatory practices that you just outlined. Yeah. For a while. And I think it's only for a while, because what is stronger is when people do feel respected, trusted, and part of a larger whole. They always outshine the competitive organizations that are internally fighting with each other.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, when with Stiles Law, I mean, that was certainly part of your culture and philosophy, was to raise each other up.
Yeah, and it's it's so important. And I'm in the startup ecosystem now, and I'm seeing all of the companies, and the old way, it's evolution, right? I mean, you had the C-suite, right? It's us and it's them, and it's almost an us versus them inside the culture, which is so toxic to have. But to see the belongingness and having folks like Stan and all of these other executive coaches who are kind of opening the eyes of vulnerability, because that's the superpower ultimately when you really dial it down. And when I was leading that organization, to be vulnerable allows people to feel as though they belong, and that's where that as Stan was saying, that's the beginning of something really special. And you want people to want to participate. You want them to feel belong. You want them to feel vested. The finances is a huge component that Stan mentioned. We used to do the quarterly reports and show the finances, like, here's where we are. Like, it's not a healthcare insurance company where the newspaper reports what the CEO is getting at the end of the year. These are stories that I think you're just not going to see anymore. I think there's a real shift towards the contributors being part of the team versus the rank and file, right? We talk about the evolution of things, of how far we have come, but I mean, think about that, the rank and file. Yeah. The W-2s, the punching the clock, do your job.
Yeah, right. The vulnerability, really, the reframe of vulnerability is courage.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It is. And it's also the ability to say, I'm a human too. I'm like you said, Stan, like, I'm no better than you. I'm simply here, leading us.
That's right. The philosophy that I think allows for hierarchy to be effective is if everyone, leaders included, think that we're all equal human beings with different responsibilities, different accountabilities, different skills and abilities, and together we can make a difference.
Yeah. One of the words I'm trying to get changed in my company is productivity, because everybody has their productivity number that they're meant to attain. And I feel that's so dismissive. It's not productivity, it's contribution. You're contributing to the well-being of our company by the work that you do. So this idea that people are measured, that their productivity measures their ability, but
it's like a computer.
Yeah, they're contributing in so many ways.
Well, everybody needs to produce something. The exchange of value is a basis for all human economy, and none of us can build our own house by ourselves. Well, most of us can. Or grow our own food. But the key is in the metrics. Yeah. How do you define the type of expectations that are required to keep the health of the organization positive and growing? And be careful what you measure, because if you're measuring the wrong thing, you're going to come up with the wrong outcome.
That's so true. Well, we're very fortunate that our metrics are really, really influenced by our sponsors, because our sponsors represent our metrics. They wouldn't be sponsoring us if they didn't appreciate what we're doing, and we appreciate them. So with that metric in mind, let's take a listen to them, and we'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show and Stan Sewitch.
And we're back with the Dr. Joe Show with author and executive business coach Stan Sewitch, talking about the difference between what makes a good culture and what does not.
Yeah. Engage, how WD-40 Company built the engine of positive culture. Stan, how can people get your books?
Well, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Trafford Publishing. So all of those outlets have it.
Yeah, and you have a website as well?
I do. My website has links to it. Website is stansewitch.com. Very simple. And there's also a website for the book itself, which you can find on my website as well.
Yeah, listeners, I highly recommend it. Whether you are a business CEO or not, there is so much information here of how to become a really inspiring and positive leader. So I highly recommend it. Stan, we're coming towards the end of the show. We're going to just go over the two truths of the I am. So the I am is saying, we're all doing the best we can, but influence and responding to the 4 domains. Your home domain, no one's going to argue your home has had an influence on who you are. The social domain, which is the rest of the world. And we're talking a lot about that social domain right now in the culture of the company that we're creating. Those 2 domains are outside. Then the 2 internal domains, biological domain of your brain and body. Are you hungry, tired, digesting your lunch? And then what I call the I see domain. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? Human beings are very interested in what other people think or feel. That's empathy. But what we really want to know is, how do you see me? Because these 4 domains interact, a small change in any one of them can have a big effect. We don't need to change everything. Small changes can have big effects. The first truth of the I am. So Stan, given what we're talking about tonight, what small change can you recommend to our listeners?
Well, given the current dynamics of our world, what I thought about offering is the small change that we might do in our daily interactions with others. Because one person's influence on another is infectious, whether it be positive or negative.
Yes.
So the small change I would recommend is something I've been trying to do, is seeking out interactions with people that I normally wouldn't interact with, as well as those that I do normally, and finding a way to put something positive in their day's experience. And it's a thank you. It's an extra tip to the server. It's helping someone cross the road if they're struggling with their packages. It's reaching out to a homeless person and asking them if they need some water or something to eat. And I credit my wife with doing that daily. It's being a positive influence, seeing someone, respecting them as a human being, and showing them that they're worth your time. If we all did that, especially with people that we haven't met before, I think the infectious transmission would soon reach epidemic proportions.
Yes, I would love that. One of my phrases, every friend was once a stranger. Every friend was once a stranger. So, Stan, from your own personal experience, what act of kindness have you done over? Well, I mean, you've got so many of them, but does one in particular come to mind?
Well, the recent ones that are aligned with what I just offered as small changes. I was walking down the street of Ocean Beach. I was early, and we were going to be meeting with my sister-in-law, and I was by myself. So I took the time just to go down to the ocean. And I saw a woman walking with no shoes on a kind of a cold morning. Her head was down, her arms were around her shoulders, lightly dressed. I don't know where she was going or where she came from. I happened to have $100 bill in my wallet. And I walked up to her and I says, "It looks like you could use some new shoes." And she looked down, embarrassed, and said, "Yes, I could." So I handed her $100 bill and said, "I hope this is enough."
Wow. And how did she respond?
She stood there and quietly cried. And I just said, I really hope you find a good pair and things get better for you. And it's not always about money, right?
No.
But I think what I gave her was that she was seen. She wasn't just a nameless, faceless lump of flesh passing by someone else on the way to a hot dog.
Right. By somebody who will shift their eyes away because they don't want to make eye contact and ignore them and say, "You don't exist. You have no value." It's a powerful story. Powerful. It's amazing how we can make these small changes. And I couldn't agree with you more.
One other example was a gentleman I met once who was referred to me by a good friend who needed some guidance. He contacted me recently. His son is going to San Diego State, and he doesn't know anybody in San Diego, and asked if I could be a contact for his son who might need a local adult as a mentor in their career at the college? And I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
So why not?
Why not? I mean, think about this, guys. In our culture, when you say thank you to somebody, 90% of the time their response is, you're welcome, which basically means you're welcome into my tribe.
Right.
You're now part of my tribe. You're welcome. That's what we can do for each other, folks. We really can. When you treat someone with respect and value, you're changing the neurochemistry of their brain.
I've been able to do that with a good friend of mine who is of a different political persuasion. And we have periodic breakfasts where the only rule is we got to bring the facts.
Oh,
Good luck.
yeah. That's a
no,
good
it's been very instructive. I've learned a lot from him, and I would say the same. He's learned a lot from me.
But how do you know what's
got
fact?
Closer together.
How do you know what's actually fact, though?
Oh, you can tell the truth.
Well,
You know the truth.
we both look for multiple sources that are vetted, nonpartisan, or at least verifiable in some way other than the Facebook feed or any other social media feed that is all AI now anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's great.
It is true. You know, when you can share your perspective with someone and listen to their perspective in return, that's bonding. You know, that increases your tribe. But boy, it can be real challenging these days, which sort of gets us to the second truth of the I am. Everyone is interested through their IC domain, what you think about them, which affects their biological domain. Because, you know, it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected. And you are part of someone's home or social domain. So the second truth of the I am, you control no one, but you influence everyone. And you get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Stan Sewitch, author, business coach, philosopher. What kind of influence do you want to be?
I would hope that my influence on people is such that they think because they knew me that their life got better in some small way. And that's about all I can hope for.
Yeah. And then how does that then help Stan? Being that kind of influence.
It makes my tribe bigger.
Yeah.
It gives me a really large family, and family is very important to me.
Yeah.
And I think of every human being as part of my family.
I absolutely agree. We're one group. It's called humanity. One group. So how do we take that approach and spread it out to so many people? I mean, we've got books, we've got things, but you have this remarkable inroad by working with CEOs of huge corporations. What's that like for you?
It's very rewarding, and it's also not easy. It's tough work, but it's the place where I found myself after a couple of decades in my life journey. So it's what I know, and I need to continue to apply it as long as I can to help organizations be the paragons that they can be, where people love to go to work, love the people they're working with for the most part. Not that they don't have challenges or it's not easy work, as we used to say at WD-40, certainly not easy, but that they leave enlivened and feeling fulfilled. And consequently, the organization is a sustainable place where they can bet their future on.
Yeah. You know, one of my definitions of success is when you love going to work and love going home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think you feel respected and valued in both of those places. And that respect that leads to value, trust is such an important part of who we are as human beings. With that trust, you can, like I said, unleash your unlimited human potential. It's when we have mistrust that it activates our primitive fight, flight, freeze survival response.
And we're 10 times more likely to detect a threat than a safe cue, right? Even when it's not there.
Yeah, we really are. It's so true. So the examples you gave, those small changes, that woman, I hope she gets a great pair of shoes, but I think you've given her so much more than that. You've given her a belief. You believe in her. Here's something to ground you. So, Stan, thanks so much. People, get the book. You'll be able to find it on our website. Find Stan's website. Mark, thanks for being here tonight. Gwen, Larry, we'll see you in the studio. Folks, see you next week on the Dr.
Have a great week, everybody.
Stretch the kindness, brush with madness. Is it sadness or just a show that